So you can really kind of kill a market. We've seen, several institutional owners extract from some of those markets that have really tight rent control or that we feel that are too restrictive from a business practice.
I grew up in an environment where the government controlled not just rent, but all the prices. And let's just leave it at this. It didn't end up well. And we are live again. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Multifamily Hangout. I'm your host, Adrian Danila, and I want to start by thanking our sponsors for making this broadcast possible. They are Kairos and Coastal Painting Contractors. With this being said, I'm going to turn it over to my co-host, Chris Moreno. Take it away, sir.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adrian. Really excited to have our guest today. Is just an immense amount of experience and is one of the largest owners in the country and management companies. Welcome to our guest. We have Lisa Taylor, who's the Senior Managing Director, Single Family Rental and Build to Rent, and really oversees the growing third-party management of 22,000 units nationwide. Before she took over in the SFR and BTR sector, she was really focused on business development and client services for the whole Southeast portfolio, roughly about 67,000 units, just a small portfolio, and about $13 billion of assets. So really incredible work. Lisa, I'm excited to hear more. You've got over 20 years of experience of leading teams, portfolio management, operations, strategy of conventional assets. So I'm really excited to dive in on that. Also want to hear a little bit more. I think you do a lot of work with the Institute of Real Estate Management, IREM. You also have spent a lot of time with NAA. That's actually one of my mentors who supported me, Mike Plow, who you work with. Really, he got me involved, become some great friends with a lot of your coworkers. We had Richard Friedman recently, who's also a director on the West Coast on recently. So without further ado, I want to thank you for coming on and joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's my pleasure. Adrian said I have 20 years experience. I have 20 years experience with just Greystar. So I will celebrate my 20th year pretty soon. I get to celebrate that with one of our new initiatives, Greystar. In a competitive environment, we had to spend some time finding out, how can we attract and retain, this top talent. So we, had a whole group of the best and brightest come together and came up with, several ways to enhance our benefits from, vacation accruals and other expanded benefits. But one I'm excited about is the sabbatical. So we did roll that out rather recently, but it's a 6 weeks paid sabbatical. You're eligible after your first 10 years. And then every 5 years thereafter, you get another, 6 weeks paid sabbatical. So I missed the first two, but this next one at my 20 year, I'll ring it in right. I have some pretty robust plans to celebrate.
That's a hell of a selling point for anyone to go to Greystar. That's pretty awesome. You also were recently a Hall of Fame inductee. You've done so many things, but I think one of the things we love to drill in on is, where did it start? Can you share a little bit about your journey of did you fall into property management? And then how did you evolve into your current role today? You've just done so many great things, but I'd love to kind of hear how it all started.
Yeah. So oddly enough, my mom was in property management. So, she had a friend, she went on to work for the city of Charlotte and led their real estate division. But she had some friends in the business and said, my daughter would be great at this. And so anyway, I started leasing it was McGuire Properties. They later changed their names and rebranded to Summit Properties, a REIT based in Charlotte. And, I absolutely love my time there. I started by getting involved in my local apartment association. It was Charlotte Apartment Association. Now it's known as Greater Charlotte Apartment Association. Pretty quickly, I got involved in the association. I got an opportunity to go to a dinner meeting, had a free meal. I was a broke chick and very young and thought that sounded great. And it started just by monthly meetings and you sit at tables with best and brightest and movers and shakers. You have some really dynamic conversations. I was fortunate enough to sit a few times with the executive director at the time, Ken Szymanski. And, he was generous with his time and lended support, and encouraged me to join a few committees at the association level. That's really a great way to network with friends and peers, sit and have conversation, again solving those industry challenges. And it was just a place that I felt I wanted to be and needed to be. Eventually I kind of did a stair step of serving at my local city, president committees. I am currently the president of the Apartment Association of North Carolina. That's a 2-year term. It's kind of a 10-year commitment. So it's kind of a rolling step, but I've truly enjoyed my time at AANC. And then this past November, I was elected to become a member of the National Apartment Association Board of Directors and representing Region 4 as our region vice president for North Carolina. And I'm, happy to do so. I had gone through Lyceum class, early on. They offer that. And so, I would really encourage anyone who wants to grow their career. You have to put something in it. Sometimes they're after hours, you're not getting paid for dinner meetings. Everything that you put in, you'll get back tenfold. I certainly believe at this level, someone at the corporate level, you should be, again, in my opinion, obligated to give back to the industry that's, offered us so much, whether that's, again, giving of your time, your donations, becoming vocal and advocating for some of the legislative issues that are kind of attacking our industry now. And then at some point you go from mentee to mentor. So we need to be diligent in identifying talent of tomorrow. And again, I would probably encourage most of you, if you have an opportunity, to identify someone who may not have as an easy road that you did. So maybe someone who faced a little bit more challenges.
Lisa, you just shared with us before going live that when you first started with Greystar had 0 units in the Southeast. Like they were just getting started, right?
That's
20,
right.
20 years later, how many units, how many apartment homes are managed by Greystar in the Southeast? Do you know the number?
So I think it's roughly, 85,000 units in the Southeast. So the firm had about 56,000 units when I started. But when I joined, nothing in the Carolinas. We were based in Charleston, but nothing in North or South Carolina, nothing in Atlanta. As you know, Chris Riley kind of started the Atlanta region. My boss at the time, Jennifer Buchanan, started the Southeast and the Carolinas, and I joined to run the operations. And then, we grew from 0 to, again, when I transitioned out of the Southeast, we had about 68,000 units, but today there's, a little over 80,000. So that's just in this region. So it's all built on trust. We have great relationships with some long-term clients. We have a lot of prior Greystar people who they leave Greystar and they start their own business and then engage us for third-party property management. I'm super proud of the build to rent sector specifically. I'll talk just briefly about that if you don't mind. So, being in the business for, let's just say several decades, to me, it was refreshing to learn something new, to understand, kind of break it down. How can we best operate in this environment? We've been successful in almost 2 years. We've grown from 1,000 units to about 23,000 units. We're in 20 states. We do have a build to rent council that I lead, but it's a group of 8 folks across the country, highly talented individuals from operators, analysts, client services, marketing, and maintenance that are the core of the group. And we really try to support our operators to level up, execute to excellence, and to the best of our ability, outperform the market. Today, while build to rent is our newest sector within Greystar, we manage 900,000 units nationally. That's really impressive, if I must say so myself. Of course, that came through several acquisitions of a few large firms. So we were, really had several iterations of growth, acquisition of JPI and Riverstone and Alliance. We've really had some growth through acquisition, but a lot of it's been organic and just, relationships. While built to rent's our newest sector, we like to say we can manage, or we can provide housing cradle to grave. So we have a student living group. We have conventional multifamily, which is of course our bulk. Now build to rent. So, you're out of your apartment living phase and you want a little bit more space, or you don't want someone living above or below. You move into a home or a townhome. And we have an active adult that started maybe 5 or 6 years ago. So that's our, 55 plus. So we really can manage, again, cradle to grave. That's not the best thing. We'll think of something else. But we've grown, to an international business. We're in China, we're in Japan and Australia, Paris and London. We kind of started in Mexico, moved over to the UK. I'm really proud of the accomplishments and the vision that Bob Fate has had, and of course a team of executive directors who shared Bob's vision to take us to all of these places.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible how things come from the top, right? And whether it's throughout the organization, it's so interesting to watch different management, different developers, different ownership groups of the culture. It seems to be from that leadership, and you're a testament to that. So great work. I actually have a question from someone in the Greystar team that was messaged to me, and their question is around evolution and how you have seen the client services role evolve over the years since you've been in this business. Like, how have you seen it evolve for people, and how have they had to change up their strategies?
Sure. I think a couple evolutions. So, first, it was a little more regional. We operated as separate regions. We could choose our own best practices. But, as we grew and matured as a firm and had crossover clients and institutional clients, we needed some consistency both on our operations, but also to our client services. And I think that the ability for our clients to have access and intel into our BI data, having that quick, I need this information now, and I need to know what's going on in Dallas and in Charlotte and Denver, so you have to flatten it out a little bit. So there's a lot more crossover. Client services are still business development. We're here to grow the firm and work on opportunities, but we're also here on the backside and really a conduit from operations, what we can deliver, and in between from what our clients are asking us to deliver, some of the demands that our clients are putting on us, or maybe our clients' attorneys. There's always some in-depth conversation, and we often become that buffer between, yes, we can execute, or we as client services have to deliver the message that says that's really not something that can do, or that's our area of expertise.
We already have some very interesting questions from the audience. I want to take the opportunity to salute Paul Bergeron. Hey, Paul, great to have you here with us today. First question actually comes from Paul, and he wants to ask you, Lisa, what do you make of the recent rent control issue raised this week by our president?
We know rent control just doesn't work. I mean, we have results, we have the numbers. I think regardless of what camp you're in, and we will not get into politics here on this conversation, but regardless, we have the information that prove rent control doesn't work. It doesn't attract new development. It really increases the housing pricing of what is existing. So, new development is not as interested if you have, certain restrictions. You're not going to have that growth. So you can really kind of kill a market. We've seen, several institutional owners extract from some of those markets that have really tight rent control, or that we feel that are too restrictive from a business practice, and they're extracting. So you're leaving the market to kind of fend for itself, or to face quasi extinction from not having that ability to grow. What I would say is we need to continue to advocate and show the data that it just doesn't work. Now, this is coming off the hills of double-digit rent growth. Did that feel not good, as an industry? Maybe a little greedy. I mean, I probably shouldn't say that. That doesn't feel good, but that was kind of a blip. We have some normalization in rent now. We have some rent losses. So I'm curious to see if that hard line will still hold true when you look at a little bit more of a normalized 5 years, 10 years after that COVID peak. So I hope that answered your question, Paul.
I want to thank you for that, Lisa. Although, right, the main, I guess, topic is not discussing politics, but the politicians' decisions are influencing all of our lives. And I think it's very important to hear voices asking for reasoning in our industry. I grew up in an environment where the government controlled not just rent, but all the prices. And let's just leave it at this. It didn't end up well. And there's many cases in history that doesn't work. It's not just like my personal experience. It's out there, like you said. We have certain markets where locally there's rent control that's being imposed, and it's not working. Like, developers are not encouraged; they're actually discouraged. They're leaving those markets. They're looking for other opportunities elsewhere. So I want to thank you for voicing that and expressing. That's extremely important that we had this conversation.
We think, the industry thinks, maybe a better angle, not rent control, is loosening some of the criteria to enable us to develop more cost effective, less red tape. So we think that there are better solutions, and I appreciate, your position as well.
Yeah, I lived through rent control in San Francisco and have a lot of friends in New York. And it's incredible how many units get taken off the market, or units that just can't be on the market because they can't afford to upgrade them. To your point, you lose so much inventory because of that. My uncle has been stuck in his apartment because he'll never be able to move. Nonetheless, I digress. We have, just a lot of great questions.
We're all passionate about it. So, may I interject? I didn't tell, we do have one other sector that's a new sector to Greystar. It's called LTD. And it's kind of Greystar's offering for a more affordable, market rate community, but more affordable. So we are downsizing some of the high touch services. So it's a little bit more self-service. These units are manufactured in a plant right outside of, I think, Pittsburgh. So we've got a plant we're manufacturing. So you have less cost, no waste. And these units have been leasing. They're coming in under what would be market rent for a new product, a little bit scaled down on some of the fit and finish, scaled down services, and some guarantees in place that say, if you sign a lease with us, we guarantee your lease will not increase more than X%. So that is putting some kind of, money where your mouth is if you're trying to combat legislative issue of, rent control. Let us figure it out, and we'll see how that works.
There's a lot of great questions here. So another one from the audience, Gabriella Jones joins us, and her question of saying, I love seeing executive women thriving. And are there challenges that you overcame in your early years as you moved up in your career? Maybe some advice.
Yes. Thank you. I think as a female leader, it's important both to gravitate to a female lead who has your best interest. Mine was Mary Beth Marshall. She's going to bring me along the way. In turn, I grab a few. We lock arms. I'm actually a member of Greystar. Hosts an event on an annual basis. It's called WAM, Women Asset Managers. But we started this event kind of as Karen Tapera started the event. I just help her make sure it gets funded by raising money for our trade show. But it's kind of an anti-golf event, and it's hosted with our top clients. There's a lot of secrets that she would shoot me for saying that, but that's an environment where females thrive. We used to bring in guest speakers, and they said, look, we don't need these national or international speakers. We have so much wisdom in this room. Let's hear from the women in the room. How are they doing business? We bring in great conversation within that group.
To your point, Lisa, we have like 60-40 or 60-65% of our guests are, female guests. And it's not anything by intentional in any way, like it's just the natural way, right? The leaders that we're attracted to, the most prominent leaders in the industry, like that's just the way it works. We're definitely celebrating individuals like you. A lot of young talent are looking up to advancing their career and get inspired. And that takes me to my next question. It goes back to Greystar growing like in the Southeast when you started from 0 units to like tens of thousands of apartment homes. What are some great lessons that you've learned along the way in scaling a business? Because basically you had a piece of that business, you basically grew it yourself. You've been in charge of it, like, you own it and you scale it. What are some great lessons that you learned in the scaling process.
I would love to tell you, I'm going to tell you about some lessons. I want to go back and say there is a large female population that gets to the corporate level to a certain level. We still are not as much in the C-suites as we need to be. So I'll just make that statement. But from scaling a project, lesson learned, a great example when Greystar acquired Riverstone. So we were kind of number one and we acquired number two. And while there were a lot of similarities, our systems just didn't match. It was very hard to work. I think we didn't put enough time and energy and some of those systems ensuring a smooth transition. We had people literally crying over how hard the day is, and because this one system won't talk to the other. That was a big lesson learned. And now when we go through an acquisition, we have such support. We have teams of support that are going to make sure that any integration has been tested and, it's going to be a smooth transition. You work through the cultural differences, but it's just, do I have a single sign-on? Do we all have the same email? Who's your payroll group? There's so much that goes in that acquisition and growth. I think there's been, a lot of lessons learned. I think you also have to align yourself and understand what is in your wheelhouse. I'm a salesperson by nature. I'm selling Greystar, I believe managers are salespeople. You're again, selling thoughts and ideas and your firm and beliefs. But I think you need to know what's in your wheelhouse and don't overpromise. And if you need to have a lane, keep it in your lane. You may want to expand it, but expand wisely. You don't have to go, a whole 180 degree, but, just a little expansion is going to provide better results.
It's so interesting what you just mentioned about, the challenges. There's a massive competitiveness for leaders, right? And for great talent. And I think there always is. And so you're seeing a lot of folks who otherwise wouldn't be posting on social media are now really embracing it and realizing, especially if they're trying to target new leaders for the organization, that could be a 5-month, 6-month, 10-year, 2-year work ethic. Mm-hmm. We have several other questions here. I'm going to just dive straight into that. Is right here, and heard great things, obviously, about WHAM. Thanks for sharing that. Some people have shared that. I've been able to come to some of your events that you all have hosted in the past. This is from your favorite Southern California strategic partnership colleague, Richard Friedman at Greystar. And he asks, what's your most memorable client experience? Do you have something you can share with us?
Oh, I do. I think it was, I don't know how personal I can get it, but Yvette George, she was with Deutsche Bank. We hosted a very small event in Miami. We took, a great cruise. Tracy Bowers was on my team. Tracy knows how to throw a party and entertain. And it was a boat with lunch in Miami, getting paid. I thought life doesn't get better than this. So that was honestly, just a super fun, memory. One other is, I played Torrey Pines. It was so gorgeous. I'm very honored. My husband, hates me for it.
And now a word from Dean Fungawing, founder and CEO, Kairos.
Another solution, which is our HVAC sort of monitoring solution that we have. We've been testing this for years. The problem with HVAC monitoring is that, again, these HVAC systems were like $1,500 HVAC systems to replace the whole stinking thing, right? So what we found out is that a lot of folks don't want to spend money. They want to spend $1,000 on some complex solution that can tell you if it's the capacitor or the compressor or the fan coil, or you've got a short somewhere or some sensors off. We don't need all kinds of telematics on the HVAC system. You need to know, what is the condition of the air returning to the HVAC system? What is the humidity in the environment? What is my temperature split? What is my cycle runtime? Is it too short? Is it short cycling because you oversized an HVAC system? Or is it running optimally? Did the resident turn it off for 48 hours or more and the humidity is over 65%? These are data points that matter. And there's a simple solution, the same one that we use for the freeze protection package, the same one we use for the fire detection in the kitchen. All of that can be utilized also with the HVAC solution. Very simple. You can bolt it on. There's no additional OpEx expenses.
There's,
Richard. To my face.
That's the benefit too, is your husband can always come with you on a trip, right? I've had my wife as a +1, but thanks for sharing those. Yeah. Absolutely. One other thing I want to get your take on is at NAA, you talked about Lyceum leadership, engagement, networking, but also the idea of sharing, like what you're doing today. And one of the sessions that stood out to me was Gardner Reese, who's on the innovation and technology
Mm.
team, Stephanie Furman, who we used to work with him and used to also work out of your offices,
Brilliant. Mhm.
and then Lane Gomez, who used to also be on the team. And they were on a panel talking about resident experience and consistency and where technology is moving. And I really enjoyed that session because they purposefully took different point of views, even though they've all worked closely together.
Mhm.
So I really wanted to get your take. Obviously, you get to see so much technology. It can be really challenging seeing all this technology, but how does Greystar think about ensuring that quality and consistency, even when you do have differences between maybe a more multifamily aspect and STR? I want to get your thoughts of how you think about technology and how you maybe differ and how you're the same as multifamily.
Yeah, so I'll talk first kind of high level. Garner Reese oversees our procurement department. Lane and Stephanie are absolute brilliant minds, and not that Gardner is not. He's a little more pragmatic, He has to consider, the resident experience, really how to enhance the team member satisfaction, because a lot of that technology piled on top of each other is very burdensome and creates burnout for our on-site team. So, he's charged with what's best in class from pricing and services for our properties and owners, but also mitigating risk and liability and keeping, privacy issues intact. A lot of firms are chomping at the bit to come to work with Greystar and create this relationship. But in honesty, this 200 plus procurement department that Gardner leads, that he's responsible, or they are responsible to solicit, research, vet, pilot, before kind of rolling it out on a broad scale. And there are not a lot of firms, especially in the technology startup, that have enough history and confidence to kind of check all the boxes, and or the manpower, training, support, compliance, to roll it out on a national basis to 900,000 units. I mean, that's a lot to undertake. So regardless of, technology or not, now, with that said, in the build to rent sector specifically, we run, and I think that that's part of what's attractive, the build to rent, they operate on a little bit of a smaller scale. We have the ability to be a little bit more nimble, whether it's being, having an on-site team Monday through Friday, or having dedicated resources. But we also need to leverage our technology from smart home technology. It starts with a keyless entry, a smart thermostat, that's going to help our maintenance supervisor work remotely. Smart door lock are going to help with those agentless tours. But we do try to make sure that we understand the technology. Kyle Johnson is another one of our team members that constantly vetting. You've got to make sure that the product, the technology, and the liability of, what happens if the product does lose favor or technology goes out of style, so a replacement. We have to be very cognizant of that. But in the few technologies that we insist in our space are the smart thermostat. And we do like a video doorbell. So whether, that's a Ring doorbell or something like that, that allows us to have packages delivered to the resident's door. I know there's been some legality and some concerns with video doorbells in apartments, basically because of proximity. I can look out my peephole and see, or record who comes and goes with my neighbors. Here in the built to rent space, a little less dense. So we've had some of the top lawyers in the privacy realm kind of give us a kind of a shaky thumbs up. This is, you should work. But again, because of the density, you're not looking at and not going to be able to, monitor your next door neighbor's activities.
Lisa, we mentioned a couple of challenges that operators are facing in a current environment, right? I want to stay a little bit on challenges that we're facing as operators, and also opportunities that you see in a current market, current economical environment.
Oh, some of the challenges, it's certainly blinders on. We have some supply and demand issues in certain markets, and some of those are fairly substantial. For example, Phoenix and Charlotte, Denver. There are a few other. Dallas has, while there's a lot of job growth, in those markets. There's a lot of in-net migration moving into the markets. There's just a lot of development. So there's concessions that are rampant, I would say, 1 month, 2 months. Some of them are a little bit more. Oh, Nashville, I would add that it's a solid market, but it just dropped a high number of development in a fairly isolated location. So, concessions have been problematic. I would say for developers, one issue is just not being able to hit those targeted rents and absorption. So you may see some development, brand new projects struggle a little bit. We saw back in the financial crisis and the housing crisis, we saw some Class C. Those were, ones that were a little over their skis and just didn't have the right financing. Here, it's just we're not making the targets. And we think that there are going to be more development in Class A's coming on that kind of problem potential for more sideways assets. Don't want to be too negative about that. So yeah, supply and demand is certainly a challenge. The legislatively, the current administration is certainly gangbusters with both, fees, rent control, revenue management, that they seem to be coming at us in every direction while still elevating, those local municipality, the regulations. So it's more difficult, the regulation steps. A lot of local municipalities are looking at, fees here and there. So they've increased so much cost for a development, and then they want it to be very beautiful and not like the neighbor and extravagant, but got to have this setback and this height limit. So there's just a lot of restrictions through legislative and those local municipality regulations.
On a slightly different, I want to kind of take it in a different direction. First off, number one, we had someone in the audience share, instead of cradle to grave, maybe we call it cradle to pickleball. I think that's a great positive spin.
You're brilliant. You're joining my team. I don't know who that was.
Yeah, that was great. I'll find their name in the audience. It's know who it is. I'll find it in a sec. But number two, for your millionth unit, I'm sure you have timelines, but if we maybe at NAA next year, you can give away $1 million for your millionth unit when you hit that point.
You know what? I'm going to hit Bob Faith up for that. He can give away $1 million.
There we go. I want to get your take on a leadership standpoint. There's so many opportunities, but like we've talked about NAA, there's NMHC, there's other events. But how do you kind of like maybe step back? Do you like to read and are thinking about leadership? Are you reading? Are you podcasts? And then can you share maybe a podcast or a book recently that has stood out, or someone that stands out to you that really have helped shape some of your thinking?
So I am embarrassed to say, but I spend huge amount of wasteful time on TikTok. So TikTok is where I get my words of wisdom. If you're smart about it, you can get a good feed into your page. If you go on the fringe, you're going to get a lot of craziness. But I do think you should always be learning and always be curious. Curiosity fuels progress, and education's ongoing. I think my latest book that I read was Chris Porter, and I think John Burns wrote a book on the impact of demographic changes. And it's pretty interesting how this, their view, and it's not even their view, their data shows how these age cohorts, and they study not only birth rates, death rates, immigration, how it changes decision, how it changes certainly our level of service, our size of unit, studio to 4-bedroom, just how it's going to change over time. So I think it's some generational impact. I'll give it to you. I'll look the book up and put it in the chat. But I do think that from just a leadership standpoint, your thoughts kind of boomerang, whatever you put out there is what you get. So to be kind and generous, I think that's going to go a long way. Greystar, we say success isn't just about the results, but how you get there is important. So those are Greystar's words of wisdom that I live by.
Lisa, I want to go back a little bit to the beginning and touch on your current position with Greystar. We have a great question from Jason Biskov. Hi, Jason. Jason is asking, what are a few of the biggest challenges for your managers that might go from multifamily vertical communities to BTR horizontal housing?
There are several challenges from on-site management. We have to be a little more agile and work in a little bit more of a hybrid approach because the unit counts are a little bit smaller. The stickiness factor, we find that someone living in a 4 or 5 bedroom home, if we provide a plunger, they're going to plunge their own toilet, they're going to change their light bulb. So we see jobs kind of changing. Well, centralization has been with us for quite a while. You see that from bookkeeping and some assistant manager type positions that have shifted from on-site. But I think it's just understanding the kind of different, maybe more service focused. You have to be a little bit more attuned to some of the technology that's out there that you may not have in a conventional garden type community. So, understanding how you work on that. You need an education if you're a maintenance. So a lot of our homes have tankless water heaters. We haven't had that challenge. We don't have that training in KMT, so that's just some of those differences. It's been a challenge for our construction management team and our due diligence, our regional maintenance managers, when they look at completing a due diligence, what's your capital expense going to be? So some of the budgeting, there are really a lot of differences, changing job requirements, fewer staff. So you have to hire the right person who's really going to, love this asset, but also be able to conduct the thoughtful strategic planning. But also shared maintenance and kind of a dotted line to our centralized services and having, some of those responsibilities taken away or handled in our Dallas office or our Memphis office. AI and changing jobs, and whether it's in the build to rent or centralization in the multifamily, our jobs are changing with AI. I think ChatGPT, Copilot, whatever, it can help you if you're on site, write a better script for your website. It can, respond to a resident. Maybe there's a resident notice and you've had a rash of car break-ins. I was speaking with someone recently who said, their manager ran it through ChatGPT and said, look at this great letter. It sounded great, but it said, our top priority is to ensure your absolute safety. That's what ChatGPT says. That's like, what? That is not what we want. That is not the message we are here to deliver. So you can't trust that. You have to make sure that you're leveraging the technology, but being smart about that as well. But if you think about some of the jobs changing, there needs to be some psychological support around that. There's some mental health challenges. I'm just saying there's, needs to be some concerted effort around showing empathy, having a plan, and some education around that.
I'd love to kind of get your thoughts around, obviously the motivations for you about getting involved in becoming the chair, like of the Apartment Association of North Carolina, or the Greater Carolina Association. I know there's multiple, but maybe around motivation and then advice you have for others of getting involved in like ways that you think people could get involved, earlier in their career.
So I say just get started. You don't have to wait for an invitation. Educate yourself, know what's available. You can volunteer. You can start with, your local dinner meetings, volunteer for a committee, maybe volunteer to chair or start out with a co-chair of a committee. Find out what you're passionate about, from membership to apartmentalize. If you're looking at, from a national standpoint at the NAA level, looking at apartmentalize or the legislative committee operations. I've served on budget and finance. I don't love budget and finance, but it's my forte. I love numbers. So, I've served on that committee for the longest. And you need to serve over time so you can start seeing and you can understand the changes, even understand what the conversation's about, understand how it's changed and what questions to ask. We, the committee members, the board members, it's up to us to make sure that staff who do most of the heavy lifting, they're absolutely amazing. But it's our burden to make sure that decisions are made on how best to serve our industry, where we need the service, where they're going to put the time and energy and money and training. I think it's just, again, getting involved and understanding that, some people want to start at the top. We have a Region 4. I know we have a national audience here, but Region 4 is kind of the Carolinas, Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky. We have just a huge number of volunteers that want to be on some of our committees. But, to be honest, if you haven't been engaged in your local committee, if you haven't attended or chaired your state, then you may not be selected. It's going to be hard to go from sitting at home to serving at the national level, only because we have so many highly qualified. They're very coveted positions on the committee, but there's other ways to serve as well. If you go on the naahq.org, their website, you'll see lots of other ways than just committee service. But I would say start by going to dinner meetings, sitting with people you don't know, making your own network, understanding what value that brings, both long-term and short-term.
Lisa, a significant part of our audience, it's made of supplier partners. If I was a supplier partner that gets 30 minutes with Lisa, right, how would you coach me to make a very on-point presentation and impress Lisa and maybe have a chance at becoming a vendor for Greystar?
Great question. I would say first, it depends on, is there technology involved and do you need integration? And, have we gone through some approval processes? And do you do business with Greystar anywhere else? I mean, those are just a few, low hurdles. There's a lot of opportunities. I think step one is, or a step is, becoming an approved supplier partner within our compliance partner, right? Net vendor check. You've gone through that approval process. Many relationships just start at the local level, getting involved in the local city offices. Most of our offices around the country have a reverse trade show of sorts, just away from the association, but just with the Greystar team members. And we make sure that decision makers are present, directors, RPM, kind of that construction level decision makers, as well as property manager and maintenance supervisors. So it really depends on what you're selling, of who's going to make those decisions, and do they need national buy-in, or can you make it at that local level? But just understanding that is relationship over time. That's what kind of gets your foot in the door. I am always curious to hear. So I don't want you all reaching out to me right now. Let's temper it. But I love to hear what's latest and greatest, and I will get you in touch. It's really hard, particularly if you're like a specialty, say solar provider. And it's like, who do I go to within Greystar to talk about solar? If you contact me, I'll make sure that you get to Chris Laughlin's team. We're a big group. There's lots of channels, and it really depends on, your goods and services where I would direct you to start. But I think most of our teams are open to hearing, what's out there, latest and greatest. Now, let me say that Gardner and his team, they negotiate. We have some national partners, and through that negotiation, they're giving us our best prices, their best service, training, support. So we are obligated. That's a two-way street. We feel there's an obligation when we say, we're going to spend this type of money. We feel that that's what we need to do, because they're really taking a risk on us and negotiating this contract that we need to give back. That doesn't mean that those aren't vetted regularly, and there's, more expansion groups coming in all the time.
This is great. Are there some folks you'd like to call out who have been great mentors to you in your career, and advocates that you just want to shout out that, that people should be aware of, and that have helped you in your career?
So I've already mentioned one. That's Mary Beth Marshall, but it's Mary Beth Woodard. She's, absolutely incredible. She was the first female chair for NAA. I had the pleasure of working with her at Summit Properties for a couple decades, and I think that she, above all others, stand out as exemplary. Scott Wilkerson, he's never been a direct mentor, but I am taking notes anytime I'm sitting next to him. I am learning. He's dropping little crumbs. I'm picking them up. He's smart. And he's smart the way I'm not smart. So he's, a CPA. He's, runs chief investment officer for Ginkgo Residential. So he's super smart. One gentleman, John Gray, he was the president of Summit. I think he's, retiring, offering fishing in Montana lessons now. He's living the good life, but he was brilliant. He built a company where people just kind of clamored, like you wanted to come to work for this group. And if you made it there, you were at this echelon level. So what he was able to do with Summit Properties was very admirable.
Lisa, as we're approaching the end of our conversation today, unfortunately, I'd like to ask you a question that we ask all of our guests. Legacy, legacy is important to all of us, I believe. How would you like to be remembered? What would you like your legacy to be?
That she was fair. It sounds like a low bar. It's not. She was a fair person. So hard when she needed to be, supportive, inspirational to a certain extent. I have 3 daughters in the business. So now my legacy is let me help them grow and advance. 2 of them in marketing, which is a creative side. That's not necessarily my strengths, pragmatic problem solver. And then I have one who's a property manager. And that's, I would say, 2 toughest jobs in our whole business, from soup to nuts, is the on-site manager and the on-site maintenance supervisor. I mean, that's where it hits the road and it's hard. So if I can be an inspiration to that group of people, then that's what I'm here for.
We appreciate your time with us here today, Lisa. A couple of things before we wrap up. How can someone in our audience reach out to you if they want to reach out to you? And secondly, any other final thoughts, any things that you wish we would have covered, we didn't have the opportunity to during the conversation?
No, I think you're probably sick of hearing from me, so I don't have much else to say, and I appreciate that. So I am on LinkedIn, Lisa Taylor Greystar. You should be able to find me easily there. My email address is ltaylor@greystar.com. I've been around a while, so it's an easy email to know. So I welcome the opportunity to hear from any of the audience members. And I appreciate you audience members for joining. We know you're all busy and, taking time out of your day. I truly appreciate the time. And of course, Adrian and Chris, thank you for the opportunity.
Chris, any final thoughts?
This has been a blast. Thank you for spending the time with us. I love the nuggets. I'm excited to see you soon. I'm excited to see you. I think you'll be in Atlanta for Alan King at the Assembly of Delegates.
Of course,
right?
100%. Yes, absolutely.
I'm a mile away from the hotel. So, everyone else in Atlanta has to come like 10, 20, 30 minutes. I'm like, I can walk to that hotel. So I'm really excited for it.
That's nice.
But no, I appreciate your time. I appreciate all that you do. And I'm really excited for your venture into STRs, LDRs, the BTR. And I just want to continue to hear more about it. So we may have to have you on the episode again later this year or next year.
That's right. Absolutely. Well, I welcome the opportunity.
Thank you,
gentlemen.
Everybody, thank you so much for being with us today, for hanging out with us. I want to also thank our sponsors, Kairos and Coastal Painting Contractors, for making this broadcast possible. I'm Adrian Danila. We sign off here. Have an amazing afternoon. Take care.